Hey everybody, we're back here again with former AP Newsman Bryant Thomas, talking to us from New Hampshire. And Bryant, we're only days away from the election. Who's going to win and why?
Well, if you believe the polls, it's probably going to be Joe Biden. But I think a lot of things are going to tighten between now and Election Day. You and I have discussed this privately before. And the biggest thing is that Trump's people lied to pollsters in 2016. And there's nothing to suggest they're not lying this time, too. So I think the numbers you're going to see on election night are going to be much closer than what they were in 2016. Now, Biden's lead is much greater in the polls than it was for Hillary Clinton. So that's why perhaps Biden has a better chance of becoming the next president, save what's going on in the battleground states.
Of course, Trump has been saying they are suppression polls, not to be believed.
Well, of course he's going to say that. I would too if I were trailing as badly as he is in the battleground states. I would say that and much more, and he has. Um, the issue is not so much the polling, is the fact that this president is not talking about what's on the mind of voters. Uh, they're not concerned about the Supreme Court justice. They're concerned about COVID and they're concerned about their livelihoods. And those are the two things that Trump has been scamped with in terms of information.
Well, there are those that say, though, that there's the enthusiasm gap, that the crowds that are turning out for Trump and the emotion that he's eliciting from them overshadows the meager gatherings that Biden is drawing. Now, how big a factor is that in terms of predicting how much of that will turn into a winning turnout for Trump on Election Day?
Well, I think that Trump is rallying his base after a false start because of his own COVID-19 sickness. And he was playing catch up ball. And I think he realized, and he even admitted that he was going to do rally after rally after rally, sometimes three in a day, to make up for lost time. Biden had the opportunity of campaigning all through that period. And more importantly, if you believe all of the numbers that have been cast in terms of votes so far, which is well above 70 million, um, Biden, I'm sure, is taking some comfort in the fact that many of those people who have voted already are Democrats. We know that from the numbers. Um, and many of those people who have voted so far are new voters, which also bodes well for Biden. Whether it's enough to win, who knows?
There are those who say that, in addition to the polls not being accurate, it's an overblown analysis that COVID is going to be the determining factor in this election. There are those who say that many people see the COVID situation as something that Biden would not have been able to handle any better or sooner, especially since he was critical of Trump in the beginning for closing down the travel from China, saying that he was xenophobic. So therefore, there are people that are saying that, would Biden really have done much better or done it sooner than Trump? Could anybody have handled it better? What do you think of that analysis?
Well, I think it's flawed probably only because um, Biden would have listened to the scientists. He would have listened to the doctors. And I think that once you got all those experts in the same room, I think the closures would have started earlier. The mask mandates would have come, and we would not have had this false start with openings that is now going to have to be reversed, no matter who wins the election in uh, next week, next month. So I think that's coming. We know that's coming as long as people insist on not wearing masks, and the public has been treated to a steady diet of that from this White House, saying we don't need to wear a mask and ridiculing people who do, when in effect that's what's going to stop this virus from spreading until there's a usable vaccine, and not wearing a mask is only going to drive the numbers up faster.
So you see that as the overriding concern of the majority of voters, and that'll be a deciding factor in Trump's defeat?
Well, I think it's going to be that, and it's going to be the resulting economic stress. Now, we've had great third quarter GDP numbers that were released on Thursday, but the thing is that that followed a tremendous contraction in the second quarter. So overall, 2020 is still not going to be a barn burner by any stretch of the imagination, and we still have tens of millions of people out of work and whose jobs are no more secure today in terms of coming back to work than they were 5 months ago at the height of this pandemic. So I think those are the things that are really on people's minds. Well, am I going to get sick? Am I going to have a job? And more importantly, when is the government going to pony up with the kind of support, and that means another stimulus package that we need to get from day to day?
What about those who also see as a big element people's distaste of all the rioting and violence that's broken out in major cities across the country?
I don't see that as an issue at all. It's an issue in local races. It's an issue for cities that have had ongoing problems with violence. But if you're talking to people, for instance, in my neck of the woods up here in New Hampshire, nobody cares about that. They're not talking about that. They're talking about the virus. They're talking about the economy. That's what they're talking about.
If Biden does become the next president, what kind of changes for the better do you expect to see, and perhaps changes for the worse, and perhaps just status quo? How do you see a Biden administration taking the reins and what they're going to be doing?
Well, I think the first thing they're going to do is if they don't do it between the election and the inauguration day, will be to try to pass some sort of stimulus package. Now, if the Republicans get their heads handed to them and they lose the Senate and continue to see the Democrats hold the House and Biden in the White House, there will be very little incentive for them to hop on board a new stimulus package in the size that Democrats want. I don't know. I think it's going to be very touchy for the first few weeks. And the thing that's going to be the deciding factor on how successful Biden will be is the first 100 days, as we know. If they can get things rolling with a stimulus package, if by then we have a workable virus, then you're going to see the types of things that they can point to and say, look, we are making things better. We never told you, and neither side has ever said, this is all going to go away at the turn of 2021. Nobody's saying that. And I think the American people are going to be patient to a point, with whoever the president is in 2021. But that patience is going to be very limited in terms of the type of progress that we need to make, both in battling the virus and in returning the economy to its health.
What about concerns that Joe Biden is cognitively not up to the job and he's really going to be controlled probably by Kamala Harris, who will be the real president, or others around him that'll really be in charge rather than Joe Biden? What about that?
Well, it wouldn't be the first time we've had that. Look at Ronald Reagan. I mean, it's there are plenty of people who believed that Reagan was just an actor, and he was very good at getting people to go along with what he was saying when what he was saying made no sense. And the difference, I think, will be that what Biden is going to try to do is make sure that what he says is sensible. He's not going to promise pie in the sky, jibe to people just to say, look, I'm going to make you feel better, when in fact they don't feel better. He knows better than that. And I think Republicans are going to be very, very quick to remind everybody that this president had better deliver, and better deliver quickly, especially if they have total control of the government.
What about those who expect no clear winner November 3rd, and perhaps not a clear winner for weeks or even months? Then what happens? Do you see that as a distinct possibility? And if that does occur, what then?
Well, I don't think it's going to be months. I think it could be a couple of weeks. One of the things you have to remember is that many of these battleground states, for instance, Ohio, is already tabulating mail-in and absentee votes, and they're going to release the numbers when the polls close. Other states have that situation in place as well. Not all the battleground states are going to be in that position, but it's going to give you a sense of where the election is going. And let me amplify that by saying that months ago I told you to keep your eye on Texas.
Right.
Keep your eye on Texas. Beto O'Rourke has been going door to door trying to round up as many voters as he possibly can, new voters, Hispanic voters, where he had a connection. And I think that if the polls shrinking in terms of the separation between Trump and Biden are correct in Texas, there may be something going on there that we have not seen since LBJ. And I think that that's one of the things you've got to keep in mind. If there's a clear impetus toward Biden on election night in some of the bigger states, Florida, Texas, Illinois, New York, and it becomes mathematically a problem for Trump if it doesn't look like he can grab one of those big states. If he loses Texas, it's over. It's over. And that's one of the problems that Trump has. He's got to maintain the states that he took in 2016, and that's a tall order right now. And Mitch McConnell was even saying now that there's more than a 50-50 chance that the Republicans are going to lose the Senate.
Yeah. If Biden does become the next president, he's been stressing unity. We are the United States of America. Everybody should be included. Do you expect Biden presidency to end or at least greatly reduce the divisiveness now that we have in society, everybody at each other's throats? Will that go away to any large extent?
I think he's going to make that effort to do it with voters. I think it's hopeless with the Republican Party stalwarts. I think they're just going to play this for as long as they can on hopes of embarrassing Biden the same way they embarrassed Barack Obama in the last 6 years of his presidency. Obama presented 3 jobs bills that went absolutely nowhere because the Republicans stopped them all. After 18 million people were put out of work in the Great Recession. And only when things finally began to turn around in the second Obama term did the economy start to really perk up. It could have perked up a lot sooner had there been broad-based bipartisan support for some sort of economic stimulus to turn the economy around. And I hasten to point out that recession was the only one since the end of World War II that had no government stimulus.
Trump has been saying for quite a while now that he will protect Social Security, he will protect pre-existing conditions, replace Obamacare with something even better. You don't believe that on either count, do you?
No. If he had something better to replace Obamacare, it would be out there by now. And everybody knows it's a bunch of malarkey. And as far as Social Security is concerned, I think seniors have already indicated in Florida that they do not like what they see from this president on the health care front, let alone Medicare and Social Security. The dichotomy in Florida is that there are many people who are retired in Florida who do not rely on Social Security and Medicare for their coverage. They are wealthy enough to be able to afford private insurance or have it in retirement from their employers. So it's not a cut and dry situation in Florida. Less so in Arizona, but Florida definitely is a strange mix of people who are on Social Security and Medicare. But the biggest thing with Social Security and Medicare is that it's being lumped together by the Republicans as an entitlement program, along with Medicaid. Now, Medicaid is an entitlement program. It is government paid, and it is for those who are indigent who cannot pay for their own medical care. Medicare and Social Security are totally self-sustaining programs that are paid for by people who work and by the matching funds from their employers every time a paycheck is issued. So if you take that argument away and say, no, it's not an entitlement program, then you start a whole new level playing field in terms of separating Social Security from the guillotine that the Republicans have wanted to do on this program since it was created in 1935.
But there are those who say that Trump would be crazy to try to mess with Social Security since much of his base depends on Social Security. So why would he not ensure its continuation and its protection?
Well, I mean, there's every reason to believe that Republicans are going to go after it. If they can't go after it in terms of getting rid of it, they'll neuter it. They'll raise the retirement age. They'll hold the line on the matching funds to the point where the trust funds will get into trouble in the next decade or so, when the number of people working versus the number of people collecting falls out of balance. It isn't going to be like people like you and me, because we figure you've got 10, 15 years more to collect Social Security, then we're going to be gone from the equation. So it's going to be our children and our grandchildren who have to pick up the pieces when fewer people are in the workforce, and it's going to be necessary for greater stipends to be taken from people's paychecks. That is longer over the period of the working year to make sure that people don't hit the threshold where they stop taking out Social Security as soon as they do now. Higher income people can be promised more generous benefits in exchange for that extra money that they'll have to pay at the end of the year.
But years ago, when Biden was in the Senate, he's on tape talking about budget cuts. That was an issue then. And he's saying everything's on the table. Everything's up for cuts, including Social Security and Medicare. I mean, he said that.
Mistake.
It was a mistake for him to say it.
Mistake, period. It's a mistake. I think he regrets saying it. I think it's something he would not dare do today. But I think it was a mistake. Don't forget, everybody was on that cut spending bandwagon after Reagan got in office. And, you know, the thing that you got to remember is that everything got cut to the point of stupidity in those years. We took the top tax rate from 50% and we cut it to 33% the very first year Reagan was in office.
Yeah.
Reagan campaigned against the income tax, and darned if he didn't do something about it the first term. And, you know, the Treasury has not been the same since. And the Republicans just compound it by insisting there's got to be a tax cut in every program for somebody. Hurricane Katrina aid a number of years ago. Well, there's got to be a tax cut in there for somebody. Let's see what we can do. You know, that's the sick part about it. And that stuff has got to stop. The Treasury is in serious, dire straits. And it's time for everybody to realize that the hemorrhage of money must stop.
Many people assume or expect that if Biden does not finish out his first term, Kamala will become president. Are you comfortable with that?
Well, I think I would be more comfortable with someone with more experience, but I think she's very bright, and I think she's a quick learner, and I think she has shown that in the time that she's been in the Senate. Would Hillary Clinton have made a better president? Who knows? You know, Hillary Clinton had a lot of baggage. Kamala Harris doesn't have nearly the amount of baggage Hillary Clinton did, and she didn't have a husband who was a hot button issue for Republicans. So I think that if Kamala Harris becomes the president, either during Biden's first term or if he doesn't run for a second term and she runs on her own, I think she'd probably do very well.
All right, wrapping up now, Bryant. You're still not calling the election, or do you think it's probable that Biden will win?
I think it's probable. Is it a sure bet? No. I think we have to see what the polls look like at the end of the week, and that is, by that I mean the weekend prior to election. If we see that Biden holds a comfortable lead in some of those battleground states, and I don't mean 2 or 3 points, I mean 5, 6, 7 points, then I would be more confident to say on Sunday evening, for instance, that Biden will probably win. Right now, I don't know what kind of movement there's going to be at the last minute, and I don't think anybody does.
And other than the hidden Trump vote as we had in 2016, other than that, you have confidence in the integrity and accuracy of the polls?
No, I don't. I think that a lot of people are getting polled to death, and that's a problem right here in New Hampshire. I respond to polls. My wife has had enough. She doesn't want to respond to any more polls, and I think she's not alone. There's a lot of people who think that too many polls, too much invasion of privacy, annoyance level very high, and as a result, people either don't give the right answer, don't give an answer at all, or force pollsters to make the call list shorter. And the minute you make the call list shorter, accuracy starts to be compromised.
So then you're saying that the polls are not necessarily any kind of an accurate indication that it probably will be Joe Biden, our next president.
At this point, if you look at some of the surveys that have been done, some of them have 500, 600 people in the sample size. I never saw a poll when I was working that was less than 1,000. And the minute you go below 1,000, and pollsters would probably disagree with me on this, but I find comfort in having 1,000 people sampled randomly throughout the country or throughout the state, whatever you're polling. If you don't have at least 1,000, then you'd better have a pretty good excuse as to why you didn't.
So your conclusion that it probably will be Biden is based not so much on the polls, but on your own gut instinct and your long experience as a political observer and a very long time a reporter.
Well, yeah, but don't forget I was wrong about Hillary in 2016.
And I was right. I called you.
You were right.
I called it.
You were right, and I thought you were full of it. But I think that there's ample reason to get gun shy about this election, and I think that's what I'm telling you tonight, is that I'm still gun shy about eagerly calling for Biden's victory when I don't think there's quite enough support in the battleground states yet to indicate that that's going to happen.
Okay, we will see in just a very few short days. Bryant Thomas, a longtime newsman, most recently with the AP Bureau in Washington, D.C. Thanks for joining us once again. Thanks, Bryant.
You bet.